everybody. So if you saw my Facebook a little while back, and I think I did mention it in the description of one video, I can't remember now, but I noticed my fork seals were leaking a few weeks back. So I got a seal mate just to see if I could get them to stop leaking for a little while, and it did seem to help for a week or two. And then I knew how to get around to replacing them, and I put it off and off, and it was getting softer and softer. And then it got to the point that in probably my last video, we were doing the worst one, it was comically soft. I mean, it was like having a freaking pogo stick on each side rather than forks. And if you don't know, if your front suspension's got very soft because it hasn't got any oil in it, and you're just on the springs, when you start braking, rather than getting a nice gradual slow down, what you get is the force of the forks going down increases the hydraulic pressure, so you end up getting something that's more like this. And it sort of bounces, and it's very unstable. Obviously, if you were to do that on a loose surface, you're just trying to get it to stop, even though that is quite similar to ABS, I suppose. But I'm sure it wouldn't work like ABS does. So anyway, yeah, got the fork seals and fitted them myself. It's the first time I've done fork seals. I have had to replace them once before now, well, I paid for someone to do it. And it sickened me how little the part cost was compared to the job cost. Because the parts are about, I don't know, 15 quid, something like that for the seals. The job was a couple of hours, you know, at £50 an hour, it was 120 quid in the end, I think. And that was being slightly nice to me. But that was on Betty. So yeah, I watched a few videos on how to change fork seals in different forks because I didn't know which type it would be. And I also took Betty's old forks apart just to know how they all came apart, and thankfully no specialist tools were required. In fact, the only tools I used was a 17mm socket, a spanner, and a little screwdriver. And that was it. Oh, I know, I also made a PVC seal driver. You know, you get a piece of PVC tubing, chop it in half and use that as a seal driver. Worked like a fucking charm. I did make one little mistake, which was I wanted to firm the suspension up a little bit and was having problems finding a heavier type of oil, and speaking to Jake and looking at some bits and pieces, I was like, okay, I'll put a little bit of extra oil in and that will help firm them up. If you go too far with that, you end up with solid suspension on the front. Well, that's what I ended up doing. I thought I'd put an extra few mils in. By the way, it's 450 mils per tube. I put that in it. Well, actually, I probably put more, like 475-ish. And yeah, it was way too hard. Of course, then I've got to get the oil out, and it's like, how the fuck do I get the oil out of these forks and do it evenly? And I was thinking, and eventually what I did was I took the bars off, loosened the sides of the forks off, popped the caps on them, and had it on a trolley jack so I could lower it out so I could get inside. Hello, crows, fuck off! And I was like, well, how am I going to get this oil out evenly? So what I did was I got a syringe with a piece of plastic tubing. I primed the plastic tubing with the shock oil, and then used it to take a syringe out at a time. So I took 3 out of each side, and the suspension is now softer than it was, because I say it was fucking well too hard. It's amazing what a small amount of fluid it makes to the actual overall suspension. So I did that, put it back together, and it's now really nice. It's firmer than stock, and I'm quite heavy, so it's nice to have a bit more resistance. And it seems to have made the braking a little bit smoother because it's really not going, it's nice. If you have any idea what I'm talking about here. Yeah, fork seals is a job I never really wanted to do before because it always seemed to me like, oh, that's quite tricky, you could get things a bit wrong there. And it's really not that difficult at all. And as I say, it's one of those jobs which is part cheap but labour expensive, because the main amount of time I spent wasn't taking the bike apart or anything, it was just waiting to drain the oil out of the old forks. And so one side had gone, other side hadn't. The reason it had gone, they'd just worn out. It was the bottom edge had just worn away and it was just letting oil out. But yeah, I firmed up that rear shock. I wound it down a bit to try and get a bit more resistance on it. And honestly, I've improved the feel of this bike for me tremendously. It's now a lot firmer, it sits up a little bit higher. It's just so much more planted and definite feeling in the corners. Whereas before it would keep sinking as you put more pressure on. It's now giving some nice resistance. and you can really feel it gripping. It's good. I'm really impressed by it. Maybe the fork seals shouldn't have gone yet, but then maybe I was very abusive to them. I have got a habit to be like that. Is that a flat cap? Or is that a hat? It's a granny hat. It's a granny hat. Yeah, I say, it's one of these jobs which is really expensive at the garage, and it just goes to show why you should learn to do work yourself, because you save so much in labour. And also it's good to know your bike inside out and know if something's going wrong. You'll know about it before it gets bad. I'm just trying to think now of what job there would possibly be on this bike that I wouldn't be willing to do, and that I haven't already done. Not just this bike, my old bike. I mean, everything around the wheels, bearings, you know, we've done those. Fork seals have been done now, replacing the rear suspension, replacing the bushes and stuff at the back, replacing gear position sensors, changing sprockets. But it's good, it's a real confidence booster, because, say, out of the most common jobs, fork seals do come up, and that was one of the ones I was a bit sort of, I don't know. So thankfully I didn't need any specialist tools. The main thing I was concerned about was how much pressure was on the actual springs, like when you take the tops off, they're about to go poof! But no, thankfully they're very, very close. You can actually press them down by hand. Oh, look at all them crows! Hey buddies, fuck off! Must be like a strike. There's more than 10 of them. So yeah, I hope you're all well. If you're not very confident doing work on your own bike, you know, learn a little. Speak to some people who know things. See if you can help other people fix their bike, and you can learn jobs as you go. But once you know it, you know it. Oh, this is a lovely evening. I'm just going to carry on riding around for a bit. Try not to kill guys like that riding on the wrong side of the road. Oh no. Catch you next time. Basically, the reason I don't want to have kids is because I've never felt like I should have kids. I'm not in a position that I am financially stable enough to do something like